So the Big 12, I'm painting the positive picture here, right? The positive picture is the Big 12 is landing 5-star quarterbacks and landing a lot of talent. In the case of Texas Tech, it's all over the board, particularly defensive linemen. Big 12 is doing a lot of work in high-profile spots to bring in big-time talent. But how far does the Big 12 have to go overall from a talent acquisition standpoint to get anywhere within shouting distance of the Big 10 and the SEC? Unfortunately, the answer is a very long way. But I will say there's a silver lining to that. I'll put it that way, a silver lining to that. And really, the biggest problem that the Big 12 has right now is the NFL draft numbers, which are inherently like this is where, I mean, you're basically just getting killed by conference realignment twice over because obviously, I mean, you don't have Texas and Oklahoma anymore, like the first part, the obvious part. But then beyond that, the NFL draft numbers get so skewed. Like you've got 18 Big 10 teams. Now you've got 16 SEC teams, the two highest, teams that are churning out the most NFL draft talent every year from the Big 12 just got plucked away to the SEC. So you're losing those numbers. The SEC is gaining those numbers. It's just like this is where realignment is just it's hitting you twice. It's getting you multiple times. And so it makes these draft numbers look horrible. I mean, this is from this past year, 2025 draft. SEC, 79 players taken. Big 10, 71. ACC, 42. Big 12, 31. So the difference between the SEC 79 picks, the Big 12 has 31. That's 48 picks difference. So, I mean, if that doesn't change, you're going to continue to have real reputational hits here. If that gap widens, if that gap stays about the same, you think about it, that was a year in which the Big 12 did have two of the top 10 overall picks between Tetero McMillan and Travis Hunter. So there was even an extra little bit of juice this year in the Big 12 draft. But the positive is Houston and BYU, two teams that I talked about earlier in the show, just landed 5-star quarterbacks in this class, teams that are stepping up their talent evaluation game. They did not have a single player drafted combined between them this year. So we're seeing now these schools that they have not been the ones churning out the talent. Now they're going out making a concerted effort to get said talent to start churning it out. So I think it's a good thing that you're seeing schools that, didn't even have someone drafted. We're not on the high end of the talent sphere in the Big 12. They're going out and landing those type of players right now. Texas Tech had that number one portal class. They only had 2 players drafted this past year. That was tied for 6th in the conference. So that's why we're here talking about this. These schools that were not high up on that talent list, they're now starting to procure some real players. Like Tech, only 2 players drafted last year. I bet Texas Tech will have more players that get drafted from that defensive line transfer class than they had drafted all of last season total, right? I mean, that's the level of player, the caliber of player that they were pulling in there, and there were 4 or 5 of them in the portal. So, and frankly, I'm about to break down here in more detail, like where Big 12 recruiting is at from a granular level in high school recruiting. But the portal, to me, I feel like that's almost a better way to be judging an actual roster's talent level these days. I know that's probably a little bit unfair because the Big 12 has so many developmental programs, and that is still going to be real lifeblood. But man, the crazy competition to me seems to be in the portal. It can make so much more of a drastic difference, it would appear, by getting ready-made talent. And schools are sending so much more of their resources toward that as opposed to high school recruiting now. So we're going to do both. Okay. But if you want, these are harsh. All right. Like Big 12 fans, sometimes you got to hear things you don't like. These numbers are not going to sound great. High school recruiting in the 2025 class. So that is not Ryder Lyons. That is not Keyshawn Henderson. That is last year. Okay. 2025 class. The Big 12 did not have a single team in the top 25 of the final On3 consensus recruiting rankings. TCU was number 1 at number 26. They had 6 4-star players. There was not a single consensus 5-star player in the Big 12. Now, as I mentioned, Like Lincoln Cure at K-State, he was a 5-star according to at least one recruiting service, but he was not a consensus 5-star there. Colorado was the 35th best class. K-State was 37, Baylor 39, Oklahoma State top 40. Those are your only classes in the top 40 in terms of high school talent in 2025. Frankly, we're talking about 5-star recruits here, but it's not looking a whole lot better, at least as of right now. Very early. There's a lot to sort out still, but Kansas is the closest to the top 25 right now at number 27 in the 2026 class. They are number 27. Texas Tech is at 35, and that's it in the top 40. So it's a lot to come, a lot to play out, a lot to happen. But even with these acquisitions, this is the point. Like, there is still a ways to go. Now, Kansas is another school that probably deserves some mention here because they have stepped their recruiting game up a bit this year by, in large part, devoting more financial resources to it. A place that obviously historically has been so tied to the blue blood basketball program that they have. They're now recognizing, hey, football is something we need to really go all in on, and they are spending more. They are spending like it. They are doing a better job there. If you want total 5-star players, this maybe seems a little bit better. I mentioned no 5-star players, 0 in the 25 class. 2026, the Big 12 does have a couple. We have talked about them all night so far. So there's 2. The SEC has 8 right now for reference. SEC has 8 5-star players. Pretty in line with, like, if we're going to extrapolate out those draft numbers, the 79 to 31 draft numbers, it's pretty in line with about what you would expect. But at least getting a couple, and you've got them both at really high-profile positions at quarterback. Transfer portal is much more encouraging, okay? I do really believe, like, the portal, to me, it seems to be more of the lifeblood of college football these days. It also is one, if you want to accuse me of Big 12 homer looks way better for the Big, whatever, I still read the high school stuff first. But if you're looking at top 25 Big 12 portal recruiting classes, there are 5. There were 0 high school top 25 Big 12 recruiting classes last year. Tech, number 1 or 2, as I said, depending on where you look. Baylor's at 18. K-State is at 20. Colorado's at 23. And then we've got Oklahoma State, 29, Arizona State, 36, UCF, 40, if you're looking at schools that are in the top 40. So those numbers sound a lot better. Those sound a lot better. They're going to be more ready to compete immediately. So it speaks more to what the Big 12 would be like this year as opposed to years down the road. So how helpful is all this data? One question I think is fair to ask here is how helpful is all this data when the recruiting landscape maybe about to shift dramatically again because of the House settlement? Probably a fair question. We still don't know how all of this will break down. Again, something that many of you, I'm sure, are sick of hearing me talk about on the show. We don't know how well they're going to be able to enforce things. And will this take Texas Tech's spending spree mentality and attitude totally out of it? It could. If you ask many Big 12 athletic directors, they're certainly pushing that message that it will. But if you ask most anybody else in college athletics, there seems to be a lot of pessimism that it actually would do that. So we shall see. But it underscores the big point here, which is that, hey, great for the Big 12 to have some of these wins, but everybody needs to continue doing this. It's got to keep pushing forward because there still is a very wide talent gap. It's not everything. Being a developmental program, you can churn out great college players that were 3-star, 3-star recruits, whatever it might be. You can definitely do that, but over the long haul, talent is going to win out. I will say the silver lining here is that where we're seeing the Big 12 start to step up is at really important positions. Obviously, quarterback above all else, and that's the 2 guys that we've been talking about here in the 26 class. 2 5-star quarterbacks. You'd want to see that more than anything if you're going to pick out a couple 5-stars for the Big 12 to have nailed down. But even beyond that, like Texas Tech, and this was in Shahan Jayaraj's story today that I again will highly encourage everybody to go read from CBS Sports. Great read on what's going on at Texas Tech in depth. He said he had been working on it for months. He had been in Lubbock there. But there was talk about how James Blanchard, the GM there, he had identified like, hey, let's go get defensive linemen. Like this is what we need, defensive linemen. If we're going to win big, we got to be really good up in the trenches. And so he kind of seemed to identify it as almost a market inefficiency. Well, there's a lot of money being thrown around for, big defensive linemen. Don't get me wrong. But maybe not as much as teams that get focused on like receivers, obviously quarterbacks. And Tech felt good about its quarterback in Baron Morton, so they could go out and spend more on defensive line. Great high profile way to spend money. Those are big time players that can really help. If it's not going to be quarterback, you can argue for edge pass rushers, as much as anything, as being next most important. So while the Big 12 is still trailing the overall talent game here by quite a bit, if you're going to start making up the gap, make it up at the most high profile positions. No offense to a center or an offensive guard, but if it's going to be a 5-star center or a 5-star offensive guard, probably not going to be as impactful to the overall roster. So yeah, look, Big 12 will always be playing from behind on a sheer talent level to the SEC and then the top probably third of the Big 10. But you can certainly be as competitive as anybody else out there. Just got to go prove it. Just got to go do it. Still 11 draft picks behind the ACC, for instance, right now. But hopefully that gives you a little bit more overall picture of where the Big 12 is at recruiting-wise with the big boys.